This is a tutorial showing you a technique on how to cross your cables before performing a decrease. It can be useful in pattern knitting when you are asked to work within a cabled stitch pattern while at the same time performing decreases. It's broken up into a few parts. First, I'm going to show you how to do it without using a cable needle. Then I'll demonstrate the same technique using a needle. And lastly, I'll go through some tips and provide you with some helpful website links. Okay, I'm going to show you how to move your cables on the needles before you actually knit them, which is a technique that I suggest using in cabling patterns when you've got to decrease but also keep your cable pattern going. So by doing this, you're able to continue cabling for maybe an extra row or two than you would be if you just performed your decrease without first crossing your cables. So first I'm going to show you how to do it without using a cable needle because that's the way that I cable, but then I'll show you how to use a cable needle and do it that way also. Okay, so the first step, we're here at the beginning of the row, and the first stitch is our selvage edge, so I'm going to go ahead and knit that stitch. And then the next two stitches are where we would normally do our decrease, but instead of doing that, first we're going to move our stitches around. So you can see here the first three stitches are our background stitches, and then the next two is the beginning of our cable. So our cable is not going to be affected by the very first stitch of the decrease, but it will be by the second one. So we're going to have to move all of these stitches before we start our decrease. So I'm going to slip all of the stitches here over until I get to my cable stitches, and then I'm actually going to slip two more. So all the four stitches that are involved in my cable are on my right hand needle. Next, because I'm cabling, this is how you cable without a needle, I'm going to slip my needle here into the back of these two stitches. And it's a little tricky, it's definitely a little tight in there. Okay, and then slip this out very carefully, and you can see these two loops right here. These are my cabled stitches, and then I cross them and I can slip them right back there on my left hand needle. So after I've done that, I've performed my cable cross. These stitches are not yet knit. Again, that's how you cable without a needle anyway. But what I've got here already still is I've got one other stitch I need to slip, so I'm going to slip that back to my left hand needle. So now I have performed my cable cross, but none of these stitches have been knit. So I can do my decrease right here. I'm going to slip, slip, knit. Do my, oops, because I'm paying attention to the cabling, slip, slip, knit. Do my decrease, and then what's left on the needle here, I've got one stockinette stitch for the cable, and then these are my purl stitches, which I moved. And there we have it. We have performed both a decrease and we have kept our cable going for that one more row. Okay, so I have worked the rest of the way across the row, and now I'm coming to the other side. So this would also be how you'd perform a decrease at the raglan area. So you could pretend this is, you know, the very end of the row, or this is also up against your first raglan stitch. So this is going to be the right leaning decrease, the knit two together stitch. So again, we're going to knit all the way. This time, since we're not starting at the beginning, we're going to knit all the way to where we start our cable work. And this one's kind of easier because you would always be, I mean, you're performing this cable at exactly the same place as you would do it if you were not decreasing. So again, we're here at the cable, so I'm going to do my cabling without the needle. Slipping into those two stitches, moving my stitches around. And so now, again, I'm working until my decreased stitches would be there. So this time, when I get to my stockinette part of my cable, I've got 4 stitches left, so we know this first stitch is not part of the decrease. Now I got my 3 stitches left, so this is where I do my knit 2 together. So my knit 2 together is going to encompass the last stitch of the cable and this edge here. And so that is a full row of mirrored decreasing and moving the cables. Okay, now I'm going to show you the same technique, but this time I'm going to use a cable needle. This is actually a double pointed needle, but serves the same purpose because I can use it to move my stitches just like a cable needle would. Alright, so the important thing again is that you want the twist to actually take place before you start decreasing. That way you can work the stitches as though they were still in the stitch pattern. So knitting my selvage stitch. And then here, I'm going to use my cable needle, slipping my 2 stitches that are going to go to the left. And then this time, instead of knitting these, like normally you would work these stitches in your pattern, so these would be 2 purl stitches. Instead of actually doing that, I'm going to slip these 2 stitches to my right hand needle. Now, these are my 2 that are coming left, slipping them back on the left hand needle. And then I'm going to slip these stitches back on my left hand needle. So again, now you can see how the cable is moving before you've performed your decrease. And this will allow you now, here we go, we've got our 2 stitches ready. We go ahead and perform our decrease. And again, they're going to be tight because they're cabled stitches. But now we've performed our decrease and our cable's already been moved, so we can go ahead and work it as intended. And then we can just go to the end of the row here. Just quickly get you there. Here's a little cross. I'm not actually working the cable pattern in the middle because I just want to show you how the end of the row looks using your needle. Okay, so again, we're working all the way until we get to where our cable would normally occur. So, all right, one more stitch. All right, so we've got our 4 stitches that are part of the cable, so we're going to slip them. We're going to hold them to the back. This is a T4B that we're doing. And then again, instead of working those stitches, we're slipping them. And now we can slip them onto the cable needle. I just find it easier to slip it left, but it doesn't really matter which direction you slip it as long as your stitches are being slipped and not actually worked. So now we're just going to be working these last stitches from the needle here. So we're knitting our first 2. And then instead of purling the last 2, we're knitting them together because that's what the decrease is. And then we've got our last selvage stitch here on the edge. Just go ahead and put that down. And again, you can see we've been able to move the cable to keep it in play, keep it on the panel a little bit longer. And we've also done our decrease. A few tips for you as you start learning this new technique. First of all, look at your crosses before you perform your decreases. So just as you're learning it, make sure you perform the full cross before working your decrease. So the way I've set it up for you when I've shown you on this video, I've had you slipping all of your stitches, doing your cross, slipping your stitches back. Sometimes it may have seemed a little bit redundant, and like when you slipped it to one needle, you could have just gone ahead and performed the decrease. And that is all true. As you get comfortable with that technique, you can kind of cut out some of the slipping back and forth steps and go ahead and perform your decreases. But as you're learning, I just suggest you go ahead and do the full cross before decreasing so that you can make sure your cables are crossed in the right direction and that you can make sure you're performing the decreases on the proper stitches. Secondly, practice on a swatch before you try this on your project. Pretty obvious one, and it's pretty easy to practice this. Just, set out a few stitches with cables going in a couple different directions and go back and forth a few times just as you get used to it and get comfortable. If you do mess up in your project, of course you can tick back and it's not a big deal. Don't panic. It can always be fixed. But it's always nice to practice a little bit first. Next, be consistent. This is the most important thing with your project and how you choose to decrease. And it doesn't even matter if you're using this technique. If you decide you just want to let the cables fade out and you're not going to worry about this crossing and slipping and all of that, that is fine too. The most important thing that will make your project look the best is if you are consistent. So choose a strategy, choose which way you want to do it, and stick to it the whole way through. Do not decide at the top of your yoke that you want to try crossing cables if you haven't been doing it all along, because it will just end up looking unnatural and you'll be able to tell the difference between your techniques. And similarly, part of that is mirroring your action. So whatever you do on the right front, you need to do it on the left front too. So if you cross it on the left front, cross it on the right front also. And the last thing, I recommend not attempting to bring cables back after they have been decreased out. I've seen this done, it does not look bad. Again, if you're gonna do it, the best way to do it is to be consistent. But I feel like when they phase out naturally, that provides the best looking finished project. And so I don't like to bring them back after they've gone away. But that's up to you. Just my 2 cents. In the Gramps cardigan particularly, there is a shawl collar that once you've completed it actually will flip over and lay flat over the decreased portion of your yoke. So I'd really like to stress that even though you may be intimidated by doing a different type of decreasing and by having to figure some of it out as you go and make your own decisions about your knitting, don't be afraid. You can do this. You'll be really proud of yourself when you finish it, and it's probably not even going to really show up on your finished project. So you can do this, you got it, and we're always here to help. I hope this has been a helpful tutorial. On my website, you can find step-by-step written instructions on this technique, and that'll be a little bit easier for you to print out and use when you're actually doing this in your knitting. You can also visit my website for frequently asked questions about many of my patterns, and I have a forum on Ravelry where we have a support thread and lots of knitters that are always welcome or always wanting to jump in and help you with your pattern questions. I jump in there lots too, and it's a great resource to get help very quickly. You can also email me. There's a form on my website to get me an email with your question. Sometimes it does take me a few days to get back to you, so just bear with me. It's only me replying to emails, and that's why I suggest checking out the forum first in case somebody can help you even sooner. The forum also has a Gramps knit along thread, which we did in the month of August 2014. So there are lots of knitters that worked through this decreasing section in there, and you can see everyone's comments, what they did, what they liked, some of their practice swatches, and some of my responses if you visit that forum. So I'm going to try to list all the links out for you here so that you can find them for everything that I just mentioned. And I will include a link to a knitting help video that shows you how to cable without the needle. If seeing me do that piqued your interest and you're interested in learning more about that, I decided to not try to explain a second technique in this video, and so I just stuck to the cable crossing. So that's a great link and a great resource if you want to learn how to do that. I hope we'll see you soon in the Tot Toppers and When I Grow Up Ravelry forum, and please always share your projects with us too. Happy knitting!